For Creamer Media's policy, I'm Sannie Abader. Joining me today is Pieter-Dirk Uys, here to discuss his memoir, The Echo of a Noise. You were in grade 10 in '62 when you were inspired by theatre. Was there a particular show that inspired you, and how did you pursue your interest?
I think the first real play I saw was our set work English play at my Afrikaner school, and that was King Lear. And I can imagine that's a very big, fat English play for an Afrikaans kid. And we were taken to the little theatre in Cape Town at night, not in school uniform. So that was the exciting part. And not going to cinema, to a bioscope, but going to a theatre. And it was the first time I actually was in an audience of a theatre. I mean, I'd been to concerts with my parents, but... And then this big play with all these characters and all the costumes and the colours. And I think that captivated me. That made me just inside, my little spirit said, this is what I want to do one day.
Now, Abizaid, how did she come to exist, and why did you decide to quarantine her in your book?
Well, first of all, she existed only as a way for me to say things that I wasn't allowed to say. Because in 1978, in South Africa, I mean, everything was controlled, not just censored, but self-censored. One just didn't have the courage to work things out. And then I thought if I created an Afrikaans Tannie, a familiar figure, a member of the National Party, a husband who's a minister, and then she could come out with all the secrets that nobody was allowed to know. And somehow it happened. I mean, I think humor had a huge amount to do with it, and the fact that she was a very familiar, eccentric Tannie and when I did it on stage, of course, even more, because then you could have the physical reality of this creature. Also, it was illegal for men to wear women's clothing, so that was also fun, you know. And so she came at the right time, I think, really, truly. I mean, she was just a character in the one-man show then, but the media loved her, the people found her funny, and she gave people a reason to laugh at their fear. And so she developed through the years. People just said, you know, does she have a job? Does she have children? Does she have a husband? And so I had to find all those creatures as well. She got a job as the South African ambassador in the homeland, which was perfect because the homeland was such a fiasco anyway. And then Nelson Mandela sort of neutralized her by creating one black homeland called South Africa. And so she became, I suppose, more of a character than a political icon. But now she's a member of the ANC, and they really deserve her. And in the book, well, the book's not about her, but I need her to be in the book for people to know that she's not in the book. You know, so I just thought, let me get her out of the way, because she's very important in the whole development of where I am today. And of course, most people who read the book think of her first. So I just thought I'd just let her pop in and pop out. Yeah.
Talk to us about Sonny. Who was she, and what impact did she have on your life?
Sonny was our maid. Sonny was the lady who lived in her room, and she cooked the food and she cleaned the house. That's what she was supposed to be in the structure of apartheid South Africa. She was also Afrikaans speaking. She was born a Christian. She married a Muslim, so she had Muslim children, and she also was involved with Islam through her husband, which we, Tete and my sister and I, were fascinated by, because that was like completely foreign reality. And yet we were also very involved with Malay choirs. My father, as a musician, would go and do adjudicating at the festivals of Malay songs, which was just wonderful. Sonny, I think, how old was I when Sonny started working with us? I was about 5 or 6. And she was just there all the time. My mother was teaching, she was working, my father was working. But Sonny was there. Sonny was there to make us food when we came back from school, to say, hey, wat maak jy hier so? Maak skoon, you know, and got us just doing the good things that kids don't often do, like pick up your own clothes. And a wonderful sense of humor. I think that was, we laughed. And also her children became my friends. And it wasn't a done thing in those years for white Afrikaner children to have coloured friends who came to play with us in the garden with our little toys. And so Sonny was just there, and when I started writing the story, first of all, my father stepped into the story, and I never thought I'd write about him. And then Sonny was just so important, and I realized that she was such a balance for me between the official Christian civilization, in other words, the apartheid life, and the real South Africa, where Sonny was very much a part of. And then she stayed with us in our family for, my father got very ill, he needed help, she came and she stayed in the house, she lived there, she was his savior because she just looked after him and talked to him. And so Nelson Mandela came out of jail in 1990 and Sonny moved into the house in 1990, and so that changed our lives as well.
You write that you never spoke about your sexuality during your younger years. Why was that? And when did you begin to feel comfortable to do so?
Well, one didn't talk about it when I was in that society. You didn't ask questions. Sex was the last thing you spoke about. You had to find your own way. You had to just stumble into all the pitfalls. And then I think I only actually really came to terms with it because I knew it was, if I didn't sort it out, I would get into trouble because it was illegal. But then as time went by, it became more of a part of one's life as things changed. Even in the old South Africa, I went to university and you met other people. Sharing stories and lives with other people also helped one get a focus, but it was never something we spoke about at home. It was just, there was no talk about the birds and the bees. I think I once asked my father something, I don't even know what it was, and he just said, don't ask those questions, you'll find the answer one day. Ah, thanks.
Now talk to us about your father and the relationship that you had with him.
My father was a great entertainer. He could tell stories, he could make up stories, he could make people laugh. He played jazz on the piano, he was a musician. He was just a fabulous person that people came to visit. They kept on talking about Wormanus, and I just thought, who is this person? This man always shouts at me and says, have you done your homework? And don't do this and don't do that. But I just think when I think back on his, I don't want to say his bad temper, but he had to deliver for a family. He had to earn the money for us. He had to look after us. I think he was very disappointed in me. I just think I was a feeble little boy. I wasn't the sort of son that he thought he would have, because I suppose I was very like he was as a boy. Anyway, we eventually had a huge bust up during the time when I was getting banned by the censor board and getting into trouble. He was frightened for me, and I just didn't help because I made it worse. And he threw me out of the house, and I stood my own 2 feet. But then I found out that they were looking for members of the censor board, and so I suggested to Pa that he becomes a censor, and he did. And that changed an enormous amount of things, because suddenly he saw what I was up against. We became very good friends, and I was very happy to be able to afford to look after him, let him stay in his house. It wasn't a case of he had to go to a place where so many older people are put nowadays. And it was okay. He was very stingy with me. He never helped me financially. But that also was a good thing, because I had to look after myself, which I did.
You never spoke about politics at home. Why was that? And then how did your shows become political satire?
Well, we didn't talk about politics at home because my father just said it's a dirty thing. He couldn't stand the politicians. Half of them were his family. The first Afrikaans Prime Minister, Dr. D.F. Milan, was his cousin. So there were all those people, and he was very protective. We focused on music, we focused on family, we focused on singing and choirs, and yes, and really truly I'm glad we didn't have politics that could break us up as a family. There was always that thing of the English were always the enemy, the Engelse, the Engel. because of the Boer War and all that, through the family, not my parents, but the cousins and the Afrikaner side of the family. But when it came to political satire, those words were never in my mind, even when I was doing it. I just had to find a job because I couldn't do my plays because the censor board had banned my plays. And review was a good way of making small sketches about them, because that's one advice my father gave me also. He said, when he was on the censor board, he said, "Are you scared?" I said, "Well, of course, it's the National Party government." He said, "No, I mean the censor board." He said, "Well, look what they're doing." He said, "Yes, but they're fools. They don't know what they're doing. They're idiots. Don't be frightened of them. Make fun of them." Interesting. From him it came, make fun of them. And then I realized that you have to laugh at your fear. Otherwise, that fear will win. If you look away, you will never survive. That fear will win.
Your mother was born in Germany, and you eventually found out that she was actually Jewish. How did she end up in Cape Town, and what was your relationship with her like?
Well, she grew up in Berlin as a pianist, and she had a great career, and then she was informed by the Nazi government in 1935 that she wasn't allowed to play the piano because she was a Jew. And eventually her friends, not that they were Jewish, they were her fiancé was a university professor. He actually sent her parents to Cape Town 2 years before. That's also strange. What made them sit around a kitchen table in Berlin and decide to go to Cape Town? It's the end of the world, it's the moon, you know. And so he said, "Helga, I can't protect you anymore. You just go, take your piano and go to Cape Town to your parents this thing will blow over, this noise of Adolf Hitler." And that happened, the war happened, and she lost touch with her friends. She eventually found her fiancé. They corresponded. I got to know him as well, eventually. Uncle Franz, very stern, very German man with big eyebrows. Made me very scared. And then she met my father on the stage of the City Hall playing a 2-piano Mozart concerto. That's where they met. You know, so I always say I have to thank 2 people for being alive. Amadeus, Mozart, and Adolf Hitler, because Hitler was the reason she left Germany.
Tell us about your love for Sofia Loren. When did it start, and how did you finally meet her?
As a little boy, first of all, I had a picture of Dr. Verwoerd on the wall of my room because everybody did, all my friends did. And then I found in a film magazine a picture of this beautiful Italian film star. I also liked Debbie Reynolds at the time, but this Italian film star was special. So I put it on the wall next to Hendrik Verwoerd, and Hendrik Verwoerd fell off the wall. And I think she saved my life because he stayed off my wall and she stayed on my wall. And then when I went to Europe for the first time when I was 16, I went for a holiday. My parents had said, "Go and look at the world before you go back to university." I found her apartment in Rome, and I left her a letter. And when I got back to Cape Town, to Pinelands, there was a letter from her to me. So I started writing to her, and we became pen friends. And when my mother died, she committed suicide, and it was just this terrible time of not knowing what to do and who to talk to. I wrote to her, and I just said, "I don't know what to do." And she wrote back immediately. The letter came back express mail, and she just said, "You must help your father and your sister. You can't cry now. Be brave. Be brave." And I think that letter sort of changed my life. Be brave. And I had to take control and not cry. Somebody had to help. So thanks to Sofia. And then I met her in 1975. The first time I met her was in Paris. Had drinks with her and talked and laughed, and her little boys were there, and I brought her stamps from South Africa. And subsequently, wherever we were in the same place, I'd meet her in New York, or she came to my show in Hollywood. And last 2 years ago, she was in my documentary film, Nobody's Died Laughing. She was interviewed in the film. And I talked to her once a week.
Tell us about the Space Theatre and about why some of your plays were banned.
Well, the Space Theatre was the first non-racial theatre in South Africa. I mean, today people say, what does that mean? It means it was a place that we broke the law. We allowed black and white people to sit together in an audience and see a play. I mean, can you believe that that was an issue? And got into huge trouble. But because we somehow didn't have time to take it seriously, meaning be frightened, we made fun of them as well. The security police would come and raid. And then I would hide the black people in the wardrobe when they came, and we'd all sort of go, "Oh, isn't this crazy? Yeah, bye-bye." And anyway, I wrote the plays reflecting the reality of people's relationships, black people, white people, Christian people, not Christian people, gay people, fat people, old people, all the storytelling, the stories just reflected South Africa, and obviously the authorities didn't like the fact of that. And so they banned 4 of my plays within 6 months, and I had to survive, not as a victim, but as somebody who could actually make fun of them as well. And then I started writing plays by putting things in that they banned, and these were words that didn't exist. So I made a fool of them, as my father said, make fools of them, make fun of them. And that was, you know, people say to me today, isn't it wonderful with freedom of speech? And I said, well, you know, we're not going to keep it for a long time the way we are going now. People are self-censoring themselves, political correctness, words, you can't use words, which is very dangerous. Once you make words the reason for pain, you forget what the virus is, you know, and the K word is not the reason for racism. The K word is a word. Make fun of that word, make that word, like I keep on saying, the Beatles were called the Beatles, and you forgot about Beatles being the little thing that you run away from. So I think we are now in a minefield of hate speech and hashtags, and got to find new ways of inventing free speech, which sometimes has to go through a character, like Evita, because she doesn't exist. How can you blame her for saying things?
How did you end up using censorship to your advantage during apartheid?
Well, censorship was a reality, and one had to live with it, and one had to be aware that your work would suffer. And so you tried to structure something clever enough for the stupid censors not to notice. And that was good, not be obvious. You know, the obviousness of swear words, obviously when they got crazy. They were, oh, you can't say poop and cock. And, But relationships with people, one could be intelligent enough to make them so interesting and so real that even the censors forget that they're supposed to stop it, and that they recognize things that are also part of their lives. Well, I can say that now. At the time, I couldn't answer that question. You know, you would say what I would say, don't talk, we can't talk about it because somebody's listening, you know. So we always used to talk under trees, not inside, because things were bugged. Yeah. And
lastly, what is next for Pieter-Dirk Uys?
What is next? Today, the next hour. No, I really believe that today this is it. Everything must plan for and do and sort it out, and then tomorrow will be there. But the thing, people, so many in our society, we always seem to be planning for a future thing that hopefully will happen. Well, it won't happen if we don't start working at it today. So what's new? I have a show coming up in Durban and in Pietermaritzburg in 2 weeks' time. Then I've got a 3-week season in Cape Town, and I have a season at my theatre in Darling. I have 21 shows from the 16th of December till the end of the year, which is our festival time for the tourists and things. And then next year, working on a new show. Yeah, lots of things.
That was Pieter-Dirk Uys discussing his memoir, The Echo of a Noise.